I have entitled my reflection today, Faith in Humanity. Kasi when we talk of faith, almost always, what we mean is our faith in God. Well, today, our readings teach us also about the other aspect of faith, God's faith in our humanity. Our usual problem about this is mababa yung self-esteem natin tungkol sa ating pagkatao. And we often associate or equate our humanity with being fallen, with weakness, with hypocrisy, or with sinfulness. Well, sa ating ebanghelyo ngayon, narinig natin ang reaksyon ng mga mamamayan ng Nazareth. They took offense at Jesus when they found out that he was just one of them. Remember how Nathanael reacted the same way according to the Gospel of John. When Philip told him that they had already found the Messiah and that the Messiah was from Nazareth, Nathanael said, meron bang mabuting mapapala o makukuha mula sa Nazareth? Can anything good come from Nazareth? It appears that the people of Nazareth thought the same way about themselves anyway. It is what Mark is telling us when he says they took offense at Jesus. And they are no different from us. We would always prefer a Messiah who is alien to us, someone who is different from us, better than us, someone who comes from heaven and is made of a different stuff. We want the Messiah to come like a superhero. We don't want a Messiah who is human like us. Ayaw natin ng Messiah na nasasaktan din, o nagdurusa din, o mamamatay din. We don't want a Messiah who is human precisely because we expect Him to save us from our human weakness. Even St. Paul is saying something like this sa ating ikalawang pagbasa ngayon. In the second letter of Paul to the Corinthians, St. Paul is candidly admitting that even in his life of conversion as an apostle, he continued to struggle with his own human weaknesses. Hindi niya sinasabi exactly what he meant by a thorn in the flesh. He was struggling daw with a thorn in the flesh, tinik sa laman. Ang daming interpretation ng iba't ibang mga Bible scholars tungkol dun sa tinik sa laman na yun. But suffice it to say, Paul is talking about his human weakness. Ang sabi niya, 3 beses daw siyang nagmakaawa sa Diyos. Alisin mo na yung aking kahinaan. To remove his weakness. But Paul says, this is what God told him. No. My grace is enough for you. For in weakness, power reaches perfection. In short, God wanted Paul to allow divinity to work out through his humanity, the same way it did with the human Jesus. He says, it was meant to keep him from falling into the same sin of pride as Satan's. Kasi we always associate the sin of Satan with pride. When he became too confident about his own power, St. Paul was being taught to discover what he called the paradox of power in weakness. that it is only when he has come to terms with his own human weakness in all humility that God's power could become truly manifest in him. Hindi lilitaw ang kapangyarihan ng Diyos kung nagkukunwari tayo. Nagsisimula ang paglitaw ng kapangyarihan ng Diyos sa atin kapag mayroon tayong kababaang loob na aminin ang ating kahinaan bilang tao. And we also hear basically the same message sa ating first reading from the prophet Ezekiel, where the prophet is just told to do his job as a prophet, whether he is rejected or listened to. And take note, God is addressing him as a son of man, meaning God intends to communicate his divine message through the prophet's humanity. Meaning God is not expecting him to be a superhero. No, through your humanity, through your human words and actions, whether people would heed or resist him, God says they shall know eventually that a prophet has been among them. In an earlier part of the same second letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, in chapter 4, St. Paul is referring to the ministry of an apostle as being like an earthen vessel bearing the treasure of the gospel. You remember ginawang kanta yon? We hold the treasure in earthen vessels to make it clear to us that its surpassing power comes from God and not from us. Sabi ni St. Paul, God has willed it this way, to work through the earthenness of the vessel, precisely to make it clear to us, especially us who serve as bearers of the gospel. I'm not talking only about priests, all of us, bearers of the gospel, that the surpassing power of the message that we bring comes from God and not from us. Siguro kung merong isang bagay that I would consider the most radical thing about the Christian faith, it is the doctrine of the incarnation. Ang ating paniniwala sa pagkakatawang tao ng Diyos. Incarnation. Meaning, we profess faith in the human Jesus, the carpenter from Nazareth, as God. Alam nyo, sa ibang mga mananampalataya na hindi Kristiyano, this is shocking. Bakit shocking? Kasi sabi nilang, how dare you call this man God? How can you call a mere human being God? How can you even worship him? But this is precisely what is most unique about the Christian faith. God does not save us by getting rid of our humanity and divinizing us, but rather by humanizing himself and by restoring our faith in the basic goodness of our humanity. Madalas kasi tayong mawalan ng pananampalataya sa ating pagkatao, lalo na pag nakaranas tayo ng pananakit o pagtataksil ng kapwa-tao. God chose to save us by becoming human like us. And He did this not only so that He could work for us, but more importantly, so that He can work with us and through us. He can work through us. He can speak through us. Pwede ba talaga yon? Can we really do as Jesus did? Di ba maraming beses ko na nasabi sa inyo We're not just called to be Christians, but to be Christ. And I've told you also many times that when I stand here, I'm here to make Christ speak to you. And for that to be possible, I have to die to myself. Pero pwede ba talaga yon? Can we really do as Jesus did? Can we really have power over evil spirits as He did? Can we heal as He did? Multiply loaves as He did? Can we forgive as He did? Can we walk on water as He did? Can we love our enemies as He did? Can we suffer and die as He did? And can we resurrect from the dead as He did? Well, Jesus tried very hard to mentor His disciples so that they could grow into apostles. From mere followers, He wanted us to grow into His representatives. From mere beneficiaries of His mission, He really wanted us to be participants in His mission. Pareho pa rin. It is still the same issue up to now with the people whom we work with. Many would rather remain as followers. Mas madali yun eh. Many would rather be seated there as listeners. But as proclaimers, that is something else. We would rather be beneficiaries, members of a helpless community waiting for a perfect Savior